This is a brief video explaining some of the basics behind the mounted combat system that was added in 3.1 with World of Warcraft. To get started in mounted combat, you need to have a lance equipped in your main hand slot, and then you need to right-click on one of several mounts that you're able to use based on faction or area. In order to do this in the world, you will need to do some dailies. Once you're on a mount, your interface changes to vehicle interface, and your action bar gets replaced. Mounts have 5 abilities. We're going to briefly talk about the first 4 and then mention the 5th. The first of these abilities is Thrust. Thrust is essentially just a melee jab that does a fair amount of damage. Thrust is important because it does not share a global cooldown with any of your other abilities, so you can use it in conjunction with them. The second ability is Shield Breaker. Shield Breaker is a ranged attack that has a minimum range that removes one stack of defense charges from the target, and it does a fair amount of damage. The third is Charge. Charge is on a 6-second cooldown, and it does a lot of damage as well as remove a defense stack from the target. When you're charging, you can also thrust at the end to do extra damage. Your fourth ability is Defend. Each time you cast Defend, it puts a circling shield around your character. This reduces incoming damage by 30%. Defend stacks up to 3 times, and can be removed by various other attacks as we have mentioned. Managing defense charges on both you and your opponent is a core part of the jousting process because it allows you to mitigate damage and actually deal damage to your opponent. In general, you probably want to Shield Breaker off a couple of defense stacks until your opponent is at either 0 or 1 stack, and then use Charge to go in and do a lot of damage. As soon as you charge and are in melee range, you can Thrust, and as you're moving, after your global gets off, you can put up a stack of defend charges when you're not really very vulnerable. Afterwards, you probably can Shield Breaker about once more before Charge comes off cooldown, and just repeat this until whatever you're trying to kill dies. This is a pretty balanced strategy. It does bear mentioning that you probably want to start all fights with 3 stacks of defend up to further mitigate incoming damage. Here you can see me messing around, charging and thrusting at the same time on this target here, and being pretty successful at jousting a stationary object. Right here you actually see this technique being used against an NPC. I do a pretty lousy job of keeping defense stacks up here, but you can still see the basics. I'm shield breakering, charging, and thrusting. Your 5th ability is a full heal that heals your mount up to full health. You can't use this when you're out of combat, or when you're in combat. You can only use it when you're out of combat, and it does have a fairly long cooldown, but it's worth knowing about. After this fight, I'm probably going to use it and then proceed to do another NPC for the daily.